Health crisis. New NHS figures reveal the strain being felt all the way from A&E to the hospital wards. A big factor is the flu. The number of related deaths reaches 48 so far this winter. Theresa May pledges plastic-free supermarket aisles in the government's bid to cut down on toxic waste.
Thank you. I hope
Nigel Farage says maybe, just maybe, there should be a second referendum on EU membership. The desperate search for 17 people feared missing in the California mudslides. The hunt for the Ritz raiders. Jewels worth millions are stolen from the Paris hotel. Very good afternoon to you. A rise in the number of flu cases has put additional pressure on the NHS, with 48 flu-related deaths recorded so far this winter. When new figures show an increase in patient numbers has pushed up waiting times for A&E patients. 85.1% were seen within 4 hours of arriving at the hospital in December, well below the 95% target and equalling the worst on record. And bed occupancy in acute wards is the highest since 2010, now at 95%. Well, Sky News has learnt that 9 out of 10 ambulance trusts are now running at the second highest alert level. NHS bosses have written to the Health Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, describing the current approach to managing winter pressures as unsustainable. The Prime Minister has defended the government's actions.
We have put more funding into the NHS for these winter pressures. We're putting more funding into the NHS overall. But in terms of these winter pressures that we see the NHS under, there have been a number of measures that we've taken that have helped. For example, for the first time ever, urgent GP appointments being available throughout the Christmas period. That was a decision taken to improve the service for people, but also to ensure that the NHS had that better capacity to deal with these winter pressures.
Well, our health correspondent Paul Kelso joins us now from the West Midlands Ambulance Call Centre in Birmingham. And Paul, I suppose for many people working in the NHS, these figures come as no surprise.
Yeah, the people who are working here and on the ambulances across the West Midlands and in the accident and emergency departments and hospitals that we've been visiting with them over the last 24 hours don't need these statistics to tell them that the NHS is struggling, but they are a long-term plan so that we're not back here in 12 months' time saying the same thing. OK, Paul, thank you. Theresa May has promised to get rid of what she called one of the greatest environmental scourges of our time, pledging to eliminate all avoidable plastic waste within 25 years. Well, in a speech in southwest London this morning, the Prime Minister said that she wanted this to be the first generation to leave the environment in a better state than when it was found.
We will encourage manufacturers to take responsibility for the impacts of their products, work with them to explore introducing plastic-free aisles where all the food is sold loose.
Well, the Prime Minister also confirmed that the 5p plastic bag charge is to be extended to all shops in England. Aid money will also be used to help developing countries tackle pollution and reduce plastic waste. And she announced plans to engage children with £10 million of investment for environmental school visits and a programme to teach them more about the natural world. Well, our political editor Faisal Islam joins us now from southwest London, where the speech was being delivered. And Faisal, what's the reaction been there? Because there has been some criticism that perhaps it doesn't have enough legal clout.
Yeah, the Prime Minister says that people of this country will look back in horror at some of the things that have been done to the environment and wants to change that fundamentally. Plans with the need for economic growth, for housing and to keep consumption and consumer costs down in shops up and down the country. OK, Faisal, while we've got you, I just want to ask you about Nigel Farage, who's caused a bit of a stir today, coming out and saying maybe, just maybe, there should be a second referendum on EU membership. Yes, not your average Remain campaigner, is he, Nigel Farage? Obviously, that the public may want to be consulted again. It's not where we are politically now in Parliament, but for Nigel Farage to be even floating that is quite something. OK, Faisal, thank you. Well, let's get more reaction now to Theresa May's environmental promises. Joining us from Westminster is the Shadow Environment Minister, Dr. David Drew. Very good afternoon to you. Firstly, let's get your thoughts on how the speech went. There has been some criticism saying that there isn't enough legal backing to actually put this in place.
Well, that's the problem, that this has been 2 years in the planning, and I've got the photocopy here, because it is genuinely a photocopy. They are obviously still working on the details at this moment in time. So we really do need to know how serious is the government about its environmental policies. And at the moment, the jury has to be out.
See, this is a subject which is close to many people's hearts, and it's got to be welcome, surely, that she is bringing in measures that hopefully will see change.
Well, it depends on what measures and when. We have to have some really important changes because our environment is declining, whether that's air quality, and the government has been taken to the European Court of Justice on a number of occasions for infraction proceedings because of the failure to deal with air quality. There's lots of problems with the way in which we use our land. We have a debate this afternoon on our forests, but again, lots of promises, but not much detail on how it's going to deliver. So one of the advantages of legislation is it ties government into how it's going to deliver, and it's got real targets. At the moment, this document is full of aspirations, but not really very good on its details.
We've heard Theresa May over the last year or so, she's really focused on Brexit. Do you think this is a way of the party maybe rebranding itself?
Well, Michael Gove's cuddled every Green group under the sun, and they like what he has to say, to be fair. The problem is now we're going to be seeing how they work through the detail. And I really think we need proper debates in Parliament. Dare I say, I'd love to see a legislative programme which includes a proper environmental strategy, which looks at things like climate change, which isn't really getting a lot of mention today. Yes, it's important we look at plastics in the sea. We have to deal with the problem of the fact that China has now told us that it doesn't want our horrible recyclates anymore. We have to deal with those issues, and the only way really to make that effective is to make sure that we have a legislative programme in place, but also government going out there and explaining how it's going to do what it says it wants to do.
This is a 25-year programme. Do you think change needs to come a lot sooner?
Well, of course it does, because we're seeing a degradation of our landscape day by day. There are too many ways in which we see the implications, not just in this country, but across the whole of the world. We need to recognise that climate change is the issue of our time, and therefore we have to, we have to deal with the problem of how we're going to get things in place sooner rather than later. So anything that can deal with what we saw in terms of the Blue Planet series, but also the way in which plastics are a really contagious part of our society, and we have to bear down on that. We can't afford just to kick it into long grass, which I'm afraid this seems to be doing, even though it's very good on its aspirational intentions.
The NHS is also top of the agenda today with these figures released. The Conservative government said that they were prepared and they put a lot of money into it. What more needs to be done, and how can the problem be solved?
Well, it is a resource issue because, of course, we haven't got enough money going into the NHS. Even the government would admit that now. But it's just a shame that, yet again, we've gone through a tragic period in our time in terms of the NHS crisis. The government should have been much better prepared. And quite simply, we cannot afford to go through winter after winter, people on trolleys, people not getting the operations they need, and more particularly the staff on their knees. We have to think of a different way in which we run our NHS.
OK, Dr David Drew, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
And of course, Sky has been running its own campaign to raise awareness of plastic waste and pollution, Sky Ocean Rescue. And in response to a question from Faisal this morning, the Prime Minister had this to say about it.
Well, first of all, can I also congratulate Sky, because I think you've been running campaigns on plastic use, and I think that your working environments you've already banned single-use plastic from your working environment, so well done to Sky for that.
Well, a key part of our efforts to raise awareness of plastic pollution has been our plastic whale, and you can see a special documentary about the whale's journey at 4 p.m. this afternoon here on Sky News. Police in Paris have recovered some jewels stolen from the Ritz Hotel during a multi-million-euro robbery, but are still searching for 2 thieves and the rest of the missing luxury merchandise. Well, live in Paris is our Europe correspondent Mark Stone, who joins us now. Mark, just bring us up to date with the details.
Well, two people still on the run and a proportion of what they managed to steal from inside the Ritz Hotel here is with them. There's a significant amount of jewels.
OK, Mark, thank you. Marks & Spencer's has lost some of its sparkle today as it revealed sales in both clothing and food divisions fell over Christmas. Well, some of the biggest names in the retail sector announced the results of their Christmas trading this morning. Marks & Spencer has reported a 1.4% decline in UK sales in the 13 weeks to the 30th of December. The company has also reported like-for-like sales fell 2.8%. That's in its clothing arm over the 13 weeks to December the 30th in a mixed quarter for the group. John Lewis has reported a rise of 3.1% in like-for-like sales. Waitrose also reported a 1.5% rise in sales across the same period. Tesco's has reported a rise with like-for-like sales up 2.3% in the 19 weeks to the 6th of January across the UK and the Republic of Ireland. And fresh food did well, but general merchandise did struggle. Meanwhile, House of Fraser declined by 2.9%. Well, let's go live now to Sky's Ian King in our City studio. And Ian, a bit of a mixed bag, really.
Yes, that's right, Becky. I mean, if you want one general rule of thumb that has emerged over the Christmas trading statements that we've had to date, it's really that if you were selling food, you did pretty well. If you were selling other items, then you probably were struggling well. So that seems to be the rule of thumb. Consumers splashed out on food, treated themselves by and large, but that came at the expense of non-food sales. OK, Ian, thank you. You're watching Sky News. Let's find out now what's coming up in the sports.
We'll tell you whether Europe's leading goal scorer in 2017 has made the UEFA Team of the Year. Relief gel.
Welcome back. Let's cross over now to the Sky Sports News studio for an update from there.
This programme is brought to you by Vitality Health and Life Insurance.
Oh, country dancing.
Getting active brings its own rewards.
Hello there. British #1 Johanna Konta faces a tough match against American Madison Brengle. Live now on Sky Sports News, and we're back in the next hour.
And that's the end of the show. I'm off for a biscuit. Anyone fancy?
Time now to take a look at the weather.
By the springtime flowers of a mountain lake to the first snowfall on a winter's day.
Northern Western Britain can expect some good sunny spells today, but southeast Scotland, eastern England, Ireland and Northern Ireland will be rather dull and damp. It'll be pretty cool elsewhere where the morning fog lingers. Eastern England and southeast Scotland will be rather grey all day with mist and low cloud. There'll be some drizzle in places there, mainly the southeast. Ireland and Northern Ireland will be rather dull as well, but mainly dry. Northern and western Scotland, Wales and western England can expect some good sunny spells, but fog will linger in places. Mist and fog will reform where skies are clear tonight, but a strengthening wind over Ireland will tend to lift the fog there into low cloud. Well, it will be mainly dry, but eastern England will see a little drizzle in places. It'll be chilly for most with a patchy frost in the clearer areas. We're looking ahead to Friday. It'll be fairly dull for most with lingering fog and low cloud. It'll be mainly dry, but western Ireland will see afternoon rain. Eastern England may see a few light showers too.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Still to come here on Sky News, the search for survivors. At least a dozen people still feared missing in the deadly California mudslides.
Hi, Cinema.
You're watching Sky News, the headlines. New figures have shown that 95% of all beds in the NHS are occupied at the start of the year. Public Health England said there are also 24 flu-related deaths in the last week of 2017. The Prime Minister has called for a ban on plastics in supermarkets. And former UKIP leader Nigel Farage has tweeted that he's reaching the point of thinking that there should be a second referendum on membership of the European Union. We've got some breaking news to bring you now on the troubled HS2 contractor Carillion. Let's go live now to central London, and our city editor Mark Kleinham has all the details. What's the latest, Mark?
Yeah, that's right, Rebecca. Carillion, a major infrastructure company which is a partner to the government on HS2 and a huge number of other critical infrastructure projects, has been in financial difficulty for some months, and the talks over its future are reaching a crisis point. What I understand is that an emergency summit has been convened for tomorrow to discuss the situation from the banks to provide new money. The fate of Carillion remains uncertain, and this emergency summit tomorrow to discuss the pension situation is a further indication of just how precarious the future of Carillion looks right now.
OK, Mark, thank you. Well, let's get more now on our top story this lunchtime. The latest figures showing how much strain the NHS is under, from ambulance pressures to A&E waiting times to the number of free beds in hospital wards. Well, a Department of Health and Social Care spokesperson gave this response to the figures. They said, "We know the NHS is extremely busy, which is why it was given top priority in the recent budget, with an extra £2.8 billion allocated over the next 2 years. And despite the extra pressure that comes with winter, including rising flu levels, hard-working staff treated 55,328 people within 4 hours every single day in December." And they're saying also that it's more each day than in the same month the previous year. Well, let's hear from the Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, given his reaction to those NHS figures.
We put more resources, money into the NHS straight, who are not being treated because nobody can get to them. And you very quickly get into a pretty big disaster.
Well, joining us via Skype is Dr. Ravi Jairam, who's a consultant paediatrician. Good afternoon to you. As someone who works in the NHS, how much pressure day to day is it under?
Well, I've worked in the NHS for 27 years now, and I've really never known it to be under such pressure as it is now. Winters are always busy. Well, it's always busy, full stop, but winters are always busy, and we anticipate that it's going to be busy. But for the last few winters, the workload has increased exponentially at a time when it would appear that resources available to us at the front line are becoming fewer and fewer. And the problems are manifold, really. It's basically an issue of capacity. Physically, there are not enough beds in the hospital to deal with the patients who need to be in hospital beds. Now, why is this happening? Number one, because year on year, hospital trusts have been made to save on their budgets. And if you take the analogy of a tree, we've pulled the leaves off, we've pulled the twigs off, we've cut the branches off over the last few years, and we're scraping the bark away. Onwards, there are patients who are in hospital who are ready to be discharged, but they don't have places to go because of problems with social care. As a result, patients are backed up in A&E. As a result, patients sit in ambulances waiting to go in. Now, there's also issues around staff. There are more nursing vacancies and medical staff vacancies than there have ever been for a number of reasons. So although the Department of Health will say we've been better prepared than ever and we've put more money in, the money that's gone in actually hasn't been enough to make up the deficit for the increasing costs of care and the increasing demands. Now, it's all about supply and demand. We can look at ways, and we should look at ways of reducing demand. So we need to invest in public health, we need to invest in primary care, health education. We need to look at the root causes of ill health, looking at education, poverty, housing, and all the rest of it. But people, in spite of those, are still going to get ill, and those are long-term solutions. The bottom line is, at the present time, people are running around like headless chickens because the capacity isn't there, and it's becoming dangerous.
Well, yes, you mentioned funding there. Well, the government put an extra £350 million in, and that was described as an exceptional measure. So the money has been put in. Is there an argument that it needs to be used in a different way and it needs to be put on different resources?
Well, I think there's two things. I think in the short term, we need help to actually deal with the situation that we're dealing with right now and for the rest of the winter. And this is very much firefighting. We've cancelled elective surgery. So hospitals do two things. We look after emergency care, people becoming unexpectedly unwell, and planned care. So people coming to outpatient clinics, people having operations. Now, those have been cancelled. Well, that's fine because the emergency care is important. But the trouble is, all of those people who need those elective operations and outpatient appointments still need to have them. So you're just shifting the problem further down the timeline. The other problem, which is a perverse thing, is because waiting lists are going up, trusts could potentially incur financial penalties and have less money to deal with the structural problems. In the wider issue, absolutely, resources should be allocated better. A huge amount of the health budget is allocated to secondary care, so hospitals. Why is that? That's because that's where the expensive care takes place, the inpatient care takes place. There does need to be greater investment in health outside of hospitals and also in social care as well. And I do think it's important that health and social care are looked at as a whole thing. And certainly Jeremy Hunt has been given a new role. However, it needs to be done with accountability. It needs to be done for the right reasons. It needs to be done to improve flow of patients. It doesn't need to be done because people think there are economies to be made and overall there'll be less money to spend. Because what we're seeing now is even though the money has been put in, the money that is there, and Simon Stevens, the head of the NHS, suggested how much money needed to be put in, and the Chancellor of the Exchequer put in less than 50% of that. So yes, there may be more money. We're not seeing it right now.
And how much impact do you think flu is having on resources at the moment? Because, of course, we've heard of Aussie flu in the last week or so.
Well, I think the flu virus coming through is a nasty flu, and there are more people needing to be in hospital because of it. But I think it would be oversimplistic to say all of the problems are now because of Australian flu. Just as some of the papers will talk about health tourism, inefficiency in terms of how we do things. Sure, we can do things far more efficiently. But in order to do things efficiently, there needs to be investment. I do agree that the flu is a problem, but we have a flu epidemic every winter. This isn't something that should have been a surprise. And what upsets us as doctors and nurses working in the NHS is the fact that these are things that should have been anticipated, and not in November or October, but at the end of last winter.
OK, Dr Ravi Jairam, thanks for your thoughts.
Thank you.
Firefighters in California have been working non-stop through the night to try to find at least a dozen people still missing following deadly mudslides. 2 bodies were recovered overnight, taking the number of people killed so far to 17. Greg Mylan reports now from Montecito.
Turn around! The flash flood's right there! The flash flood's right there!
In the middle of the night, the moment disaster arrived. Milam Sky News, Montecito in California.
This is Sky News. Still to come, why divorce is proving ever more expensive. We'll have the latest on that after the break.
Responsible play, but for us, it's the players. Oh, and the fun. Come join the fun at Tombola.
Now, it's often said to be one of the most stressful experiences anyone can go through, and now a new report has found that getting a divorce is also becoming incredibly more expensive. When all the legal and lifestyle costs are added together, couples are typically spending around $14,000 to £14,500. And it's how it breaks down. More than £2,600 is spent on legal fees. It can cost around £3,300 to set up a new home. The average annual child maintenance payments add up to £4,605. And there are also lifestyle costs attributed to the breakup too. Around £1,200 is spent on gym membership or a personal trainer. And more than £1,000 is spent on a new makeover and wardrobe after the divorce. Well, to discuss this in a bit more detail, we're joined by Graham Coy, a partner at the Stowe Family Law. He's in our central London studio for us now. Good afternoon to you. So the average cost for a couple to divorce is now around £14,000 to £15,000. What impact does that have on a couple?
Well, divorce is one of the most stressful experiences anyone's going to go through in their lives. It's very difficult, and sadly it is really quite expensive for people. One thing we need to realise in this country is that we have a very high divorce rate. Something approaching 1 in 2 marriages is going to break down within 12 years. And a lot of people are going to have the sort of problems that this report today is highlighting.
So what advice would you have to people who are going through that?
Well, one of the figures in the report showed that couples are spending on average something like £6,000 each on resolving issues about their children. That seems to suggest to me a number of real underlying problems. The first is the very scandalous, really, abolition of legal aid, which successive governments have presided over, so that people who used to be able to have financial help from the government with regard to their legal fees, or some people used to get it free, are now either having to pay it themselves, which they can't afford, represent themselves, which is very difficult, or actually do nothing at all. And what is also happening is that because people aren't able to get enough advice or the right advice, they're missing out on much better and also cheaper ways of resolving issues such as mediation, collaboration, or even arbitration. So what they really need to do is think very carefully when they separate or are getting divorced as to how the best way to spend their money.
How about things like prenuptial agreements? Because I appreciate in some cases it probably doesn't apply, but are they a good idea or have they got problems within themselves?
Prenuptial agreements, prenups, are a good idea. They are not automatically upheld by judges in this country, but if they're done properly, with proper advice, proper disclosure, no pressure or duress on either side, they are a very good idea. And judges will normally uphold them unless there's a very good reason not to do so.
And I suppose if you're going through a divorce as well as financially, it has a tremendous impact emotionally.
The greatest cost, which of course this report doesn't highlight, because that's not its role particularly, the greatest cost is the emotional cost, and in particular the emotional cost to children. Research in the United States some years ago showed that divorce or separation is the second most stressful experience that any of us will face in our lives, and the only more stressful experience is the death of a partner or the death of a child. And it's a very, very difficult process. That's why people really need to get good advice from specialist lawyers, and most of those specialist lawyers belong to an organisation called Resolution, which has a very good website which sets out what the options are and also gives a large directory of its members all throughout the country.
And why is the cost of getting a divorce going up? I mean, is this lawyers who are trying to cash in on people's misfortune?
I think not, no. I think the reason is because people aren't getting the right advice at the right time. Also, the court system is struggling. It's like the National Health Service we just heard. The court system is in crisis, which means it's much slower than it should be, which means that people have to spend much more than otherwise they would. And I think really the government and the judges need to look at the court system, because while it was set up in the way it is now for very good reasons, it is simply unaffordable for many, many people up and down the country. So we're faced in many instances where only the very wealthy can actually afford to go to court and get a proper decision made.
And I presume going through a divorce as well is a pretty lengthy process for many people.
It is. I think the report highlights that it's something like 14 months from beginning to end. I think that might be a slight underestimate. But nonetheless, that's if everything is contentious, nothing is agreed. That's why processes like mediation, collaboration and arbitration are so attractive, or ought to be so attractive, because they are very, very much quicker, and they will have matters resolved within 4, 5, 6 months rather than double that or even sometimes 3 times that.
OK, thanks ever so much for your time.
Not at all.
Time now to take a look at the weather.
Beneath pink skies by the Taj Mahal, or as the sun sets in the City of Angels.
Northern and western Britain can expect some good sunny spells today, but southeast Scotland, eastern England, Ireland and Northern Ireland will be rather dull and damp. It'll be pretty cool, cold where the morning fog lingers. Eastern England and southeast Scotland will be rather grey all day with mist and low cloud. There'll be some drizzle in places there, mainly the southeast. Ireland and Northern Ireland will be rather dull as well, but mainly dry. Northern and western Scotland, Wales and western England can expect some good sunny spells, but fog will linger in places, and mist and fog will reform where skies are clear tonight, but a strengthening wind over Ireland will tend to lift that fog into low cloud. It'll also be mainly dry, but eastern England will see a little drizzle in places. It'll be chilly for most, with a patchy frost in the clearer areas. Friday will be mainly dull for most, with lingering fog and low cloud. It will be mainly dry, but western England and Ireland will see rain, and eastern England may see a few light showers.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.